let's do some sort of Q&A, but do it on all of the things we've talked about today. We don't have to limit it to what we've just been talking about, because it turns out that we only have a couple of people that are in tenure process, and it's probably better use of our time to have the Q&A and let the information that's already written down there speak for itself. So questions, comments? Yes?
Could you explain how we could use the tenure thing as an outreach to other professors who are in the tenure track?
Well, I think people who are going through the tenure process often feel very vulnerable, and they feel a lot of uncertainty, because sometimes the target is ambiguous, and sometimes it can appear to be political. And I think that there is a good opportunity if your department assigns, for example, younger tenure track faculty to senior faculty to be mentored. And if you do that for people, or even if you just take out people for lunch occasionally who really need some advice. As a simple example, there was a fellow who was working in a different area than I work in, and he was like in his 4th year, and they'd written proposals and stuff. They weren't getting any funding, and he was under the tutorship of a fellow who was working in an orchard that was totally picked over. And so I took the initiative just to invite him to go to lunch one day and tried to explain to him some of the things that we just talked about. I actually took the fellow who was supervising him, kind of his mentor, down to the biggest turbomachinery laboratory in the country at Texas A&M and spent a half a day with him, with the person who directed that, telling him, this has been a really good area for the last 25 years, but it's not anymore. All the stuff that needs to be done's been done. And what did this fellow do? He's a senior professor. He comes back and he's still doing same old, because that's what he knows. And unfortunately, that's what the poor guy who is working, he's mentoring, is getting the same information. And so I told him he really needed to go find a new area to get in, and I wasn't sure how to do that in his area. But I told him, to do something, and he actually applied and got a summer fellowship to go to Air Force laboratory in Florida. And guess what they were working on? Drones. Good timing. This was like 10 years ago. At the very early stages, have drones become important? In all kinds of ways. Now, they're not delivering packages yet. I'm not sure if that's the greatest idea. But they're very important in a lot of our military things, because you can do things that are very strategic but don't risk human lives. You can control these at a distance and so forth. And so he went there, he got into drones, he came back, and in his last year, he got 2 proposals funded that put him over the line in this new area. And then he's continued to work in that area. He's one of the first people in that area, and he's doing great. But it goes back to that same principle. It's all about what? Choosing a gold mine that still has some gold left, or choosing an orchard that you're the first in. And so I think these would be examples. If you can help young faculty, even if you don't know what would be a good area for them, to at least talk to them in the way that we've been talking, and to say, is this a really mature area? Have people been doing research in this area for 20 years? If they have, then try to find something else, and that we've already talked about. Go to meetings, talk to people who are prominent in the field, and ask. You can ask lots of advice. And I think a lot of people, even at a meeting, I used to go my first year as a young professor to meetings, and I knew who some of the famous people in the world were in my area, because I'd read all their papers, and I would just go up and introduce myself and say, get some advice. And they were always very, very nice. I think they always thought it was sort of interesting to have somebody come up who says, I'm so-and-so, and I'm from this school, and I've read all your papers, and and of course be very complimentary. These are really great papers, and then could you give me some advice? A lot of times you can get some pretty good advice. Can you tell me some new areas that you think are going to be significant in the next 10 to 20 years? So there's simple things we can do, and even just taking people to lunch and encouraging them. A lot of times they feel like that the people who are on the tenure committee are all people who are out to get them, and that's not really true. But I think they need to be clear how high you need to jump, and then we need to do what we can to help them do that. So you can't do it for them, but you can certainly help them and point them in the right direction. But again, the key thing is what? get in the right gold mine, get into the right orchard. And it's amazing how few people do that. They just come out and, well, they want to do extensions on their dissertation. So, other questions, comments? Yes.
Do you accept invitations to come to universities and share this thing with faculty and other universities?
Of course, but it needs to be at a time of the year when the weather's nice, so I can do some sightseeing or something. Yeah? Yeah, no, I would be happy to do that, yeah. And if we were to do something like that at your school, maybe we could plan something to do with some of the Christian faculty. You know, we can come to do the presentation as the official business, but we can do some unofficial things on the side, which I would love to do, so, yeah. Other questions, comments? Yes?
So maybe for earlier of your talk this morning, could you clarify a little bit the difference between mission and vision?
Yes. Mission, I read you my mission statement. Is that true today? Do you remember what it said? It basically said, I want to live my life on purpose, with purpose, and it was all about doing the things that God wants me to do. Now, is that going to be the same over time? Well, in a way, the mission stays the same, but the vision changes. So my mission has never changed in the last 35 years. Can you change it? Well, of course you can. If I'd look back after 5 years and said, I think God's really taking me this way, not that way. There's nothing sacred about your mission statement. You can always change it. But what does change and must change is the vision statement, okay? The vision statement is where I want to be 5 years from now. Now, when I was 32 years old writing that, it would have looked very different than it does now. I'm not trying to publish any papers this year, and I'm not trying to get any research funding, okay? I do some consulting, but no research funding. So my vision today is the same. My mission today is still the same, to live my life on purpose, with purpose, using up all of the gifts that God has given me to fulfill His purposes for me. That's my mission. It's still the same today, but the details of what does it look like for the next 5 years might be quite different. So I'm doing different things, like I teach courses at Seniors University because I live in a community where there's lots of seniors. Now, what am I doing there? Well, you're not supposed to technically have topics that are very political or very religious. They just want topics that aren't that controversial. But I find all kinds of ways to have things that I think are sowing seeds. So, for example, this last 6 weeks, I've been teaching a course on movies that raise interesting questions about life. And then I choose movies that really, really do ask interesting questions about life. The first week I did Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors. Now you say, Woody Allen, I didn't think he was a Christian. He is not a Christian. He's an atheist. And the book the movie Crimes and Misdemeanors is really a parody of a more famous book that's been made into a movie called Crime and Punishment. Anybody know who wrote that? Dostoevsky. I'm not a literature person. Who's the literature person in here? Okay, there was somebody who was a literature. Dostoevsky wrote this, a very famous book. But in his book, he said that crimes ultimately get punished. And he said that happens because there's a God. And God will ultimately bring a just outcome. In Woody Allen's movie, he changed the title because he changed the story. So it's called Crimes and Misdemeanors, which is to say you can commit really gross crimes like killing your mistress, which he does in the movie, the main character. And at the end of the day, what happens to him? The answer is nothing. Now, he worries about it a lot. The stories. Now, this is a very famous movie. It got 25 international awards. And it's a movie that advocates there isn't a God, and therefore what you do, if you can get away with it, is perfectly okay. Now, is that what I believe? Of course not. But you can't get into trouble showing movies like this even to your students. They say, well, he's proselytizing. Yeah, I'm showing movies by the atheist Woody Allen. How can that be proselytizing? I don't care if the movie gives the right answer. What I want it to do is to make the question really interesting, okay? He does a wonderful, this is one of the best crafted movies I've ever seen. I've seen it so many times, When I saw it the second time, knowing where the story was going, there were so many things I missed the first time I watched it. And now I've watched it about 40 times, and I know every line in it almost, and there's not one throwaway line. But it is a great movie for having discussion. And again, I don't care if the movie gives the answer I prefer. I just want it to make the question interesting, because the whole point is we're going to have a discussion. Let me give you another example. Out of Africa. Best movie of the year in '86, I think. What is it about? To me, do y'all know this movie, Out of Africa? It's about this lady from Denmark who takes a sort of a philandering husband with her and goes to Africa because she's had some embarrassing things happen to her in Denmark, and she just really needs to get out of the country and go someplace. And while she's there, the guy who she essentially talked into marrying her does a bunch of bad things, and she's eventually he eventually leaves. And then Robert Redford, who plays this sort of romantic lead, becomes very involved with her, and they listen to classical music and do all this stuff. And toward the end of the movie, they've been doing this for a long enough time. She really wants to get married. And he doesn't want to get married. And they have this conversation, which I would say every college-age woman should memorize, because she really tells him off in a way that's really appropriate. And she basically says, you know, I want a permanent relationship, not just we have fun getting together for a month and then he goes off for a month or two. I mean, he comes back and they have fun together for about a month and then he goes off. And she asked him a simple question: do you think about me when you're gone? And the answer was, no, not really. Now that's pretty bad when, you know, they're kind of like in a romantic relationship, except it's for him very off and on. And then she says, you know, you don't value me. You don't really care about me. And I don't, you know, and he's acting like, well, don't try, you know, you shouldn't be trying to tie me down. I want to be free. I mean, for today's culture, this is really perfect, because isn't that the problem? People think there's such a thing as free love. I don't think there is such a thing as free love. You get what you pay for. If you have a really crummy relationship, you probably haven't paid the price. And you can't have a relationship with no commitment and have it be the kind of relationship that allows you to be totally open and totally honest and so forth and so on. So there are lots of good movies. I've done series on Fine-Tuning of the Universe, Evidence for the Existence of God, ? And I'll typically, I did one on near-death experiences and what they might tell us about life after death. I'll typically have between 50 and 75 people come, including quite a few non-Christians. So this ends up being, I think, a nice way to be able to have ministry. I don't have my college-age students anymore, but I have my senior-age students now. And for some of them, when I invite them to a series like near-death experiences and what they might tell us about life after death, I say, now you must know this is a very timely topic for a person in your age group. If you haven't thought about it yet, you better get to thinking about it. So, but anyhow, so it's funny, when I left the university, I really wasn't sure. I'm so used to having lots of non-Christian colleagues and lots of non-Christian students, so there was lots of opportunities. And I thought, what am I going to do now that I'm retired? And we moved to a retirement community where there's lots of people and it's easy to meet people, and many of them are non-Christians, and we get to be friends with them, and then we can have programs like this, and God's given us a lot of opportunities. We've probably had 50 different people come to our house for Bible studies. These are typically 6 to 8 weeks long. We do a topic. We invite people who we think would be interested in that topic, and we kind of pick the people to invite by what the topic is. But we've had more opportunity to do ministry in our neighborhood than we've ever had in our whole life. Nobody has a job, so everybody has time, okay? And everybody knows everybody. I mean, everybody's in everybody else's business. So you can look forward to, you know, I never knew anybody in my neighborhood. I was too busy doing my job and raising kids, and my neighbors were too. I might know the people on either side of me, but there wasn't, like in the neighborhoods we were in, sort of a big community and all that. And when people are retired, they have lots of time. And I mean, I meet people playing pickleball and playing softball and playing tennis, and there's so many things to do that if you can't meet any people there, it's because you really are a hermit. Because if you just go outside, there's people walking their dogs all day, and I mean, but it's really kind of fun. I don't even have to worry about locking my house ever. All my neighbors are watching out for me, and I'm watching out for them, and I've not known anybody that's had any kind of a house burglary. and I've left my cell phone 3 different times at different places, and it's always been turned in, you know. So it's kind of like 1950s. Not bad. Okay, I think we're out of time. So is there some closing, or what do we do? My time's up. Okay. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to share with you.
Thank you very, very much.